Okay, so Phil, I'm going to bring up a name, one of the most powerful men in all of the global world of basketball. Robert Canterbury. What do you think about this guy?
Robert Canterbury. I'm blanking right now, to be honest.
No one knows
I'm blanking. I'm pulling.
Robert Canterbury is, yet everybody knows who R.C. Buford, the architect of the San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah.
R.C. Buford, right now, according to Mark Stein, is being courted by the Brooklyn Nets.
I think everyone's being courted by the Brooklyn Nets. It's kind of like that, ugly prom queen that's trying to beg everyone to join her for a soiree. But who wants to go to Brooklyn? What? Because he's done his job in San Antonio?
I think the bigger question was, what would ever make him want to leave?
Well, that's my point, right? Like, and you're rebuilding. You have some nice young guys in that system, so you're just showing your longevity. I mean, there's one thing we talk about players staying on teams for a long time, but executives don't get enough credit. Mm-hmm. And executives, it's a brutal game. Executives get fired all the time. So do coaches.
Depends on your situation.
Of course.
They have a very unique situation.
No, they do, but he's also producing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so at this point, he's done this for such a long time that if he can keep doing this, like. If he's able to get out of, because a lot of people kind of say, you got Tim Duncan in the draft, you got kind of lucky that way, that's why you're doing so well. Yeah, you've made a couple shrewd moves, but whatever. Let's see how he plays the post-Duncan years, because if he can continue this level of success once Duncan hangs them up, I think that is arguably the criteria for the best executive ever.
Let's look at what has made him different than everyone else. I read this really great piece about him recently, and it basically said his, formula is, while he loves to go overseas, I mean, he very much pioneered, him and Popovich together. Pop said basically he started going on these tours with the Air Force. That's how he got to kind of a feel that, oh my God, these guys in Europe are good. And I think they're kind of two birds of the same feather. And so RC started going on these scouting missions. I mean, he found Manu in Australia. Yeah, I tournament there.
Thiago Splitter in Brazil.
I mean, he just finds these guys. He just turns over rocks no one else is turning. But part of his formula is that he goes out on his own. He doesn't. There'll be other scouts. There'll be other GMs around. But he just kind of, I'm going to see these guys on my own. I'm going to keep to my own mindset. I'm not going to share notes. A lot of guys share notes, and I'm going to come up with my own conclusions.
Well, it's talent, right? I remember, what's her name? They hired assistant coach there in San Antonio, Becky Hammond. Becky Hammond. So I forgot who it was, Pop or him, who just said, talent's talent.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where it's coming from. You produce, what's his name? Something Simmons they just brought up. Another guy
Jonathan,
who actually paid like $125,000 for his.
Boban they found from Serbia.
Exactly. So talent's talent. And, there's a lot of guys who are kind of worried, like, if you haven't played in the U.S. system, you can't adapt. If you're not marketable, but like San Antonio for a long time doesn't seem to care about marketing the fans. They just have the mentality, we're going to put a winning brand of basketball on the floor and people are going to come.
And they also try to think 5-7 years ahead. I mean, they knew these guys were aging. They knew they had to free up money with this situation X, Y, and Z, which is why I have to get back to a situation I'm actually writing about right now. But I think maybe the greatest decision that RC ever made was trading to Larry Bird, George Hill, and getting the rights to Kawhi Leonard.
It's funny, right? Because at the time, like, George Hill still considered a fantastic point guard, and this was years ago, and George Hill was even younger.
2011, yeah.
So George Hill, 5 years ago, wow. So this is a spry George Hill.
Yeah.
George Hill, 6'3" point guard, good shooter, great defender.
One of Pop's favorite all-time players.
One of his favorite all-time
players.
players.
He cried when he called him telling me he was trading.
And he's playing fantastic in Indiana. I mean, it's funny because it's one of those team trades that almost worked out great for both. But yes, he took a risk on a player who has a cap for a guy who had a higher ceiling, essentially.
And a guy who, I can't remember what, it was somewhere around 14, 15, 16 where they got Kawhi. And not everybody saw in Kawhi what RC did. And he brought him in beforehand. He brought him in, I think, in May.
Yeah.
And he started doing things like, we want you shooting the corner three. This is even before he drafted him. And they started doing situation drills. And just showing, I want you to spend all summer doing this. They had this, I guess, template and this vision in mind and what they wanted to build from him. And they knew that he could fill this.
Well, I mean, it sounds overly obvious, like bringing a guy in to a championship team who plays 3-and-D. I mean, that obviously makes sense. It's easy to bring him in. But, you know, people forget, Kawhi Leonard was playing power forward a lot in college, and he was one of those guys that he had to adapt his game a lot. I mean, his ability to guard ones was not something he would have done off the bat. His ability to shoot, he was a terrible shooter. You know, he has a great gym mentality, and often we see that mentality is the difference between a guy who has a moderate career to a guy who has a very successful career. I mean, there's no question this is one of the best GMs in the league.
I mean, the other thing is that they have not had to recruit guys. I mean, the role players come to them. These guys over the years, like Steve Smith.
Even more than role players, they got LaMarcus Aldridge.
I mean, and I was going to get that to in a second, but also David West taking the ginormous 90% pay cut to go there. But then having to recruit LaMarcus Aldridge. Basically the first time they've done this since the Tim Duncan came.
I don't think they had to do it that hard, though, compared to some teams.
Well, I mean, LaMarcus actually did say this week that Masai Ujiri made it really hard for him to make that decision. So, I mean, he had other options. Obviously, he could have played for the Lakers, too. He could have stayed with Portland. He could have gone to...
well, the Knicks as well wanted him, but he didn't want to play center.
But, I mean, Pop and RC really had to recruit him, and to an extent they'd never really done before. I mean, like, this was a major coup. I mean, being a 30-year-old guy in the prime of his career, bring him to San Antonio.
Well, they're maximizing the talent around Duncan and Till.
And apparently, before they did this, they basically, Pop and RC had to get together and say, what do we do? We've been in this game for 20 years. We've never really done this. So they basically, they just basically
I can imagine that conversation. Like, hi, LaMarcus, we want you to play basketball for us. Will you sign?
See, that was the problem. Like, when LaMarcus went and met with the Lakers, they talked about, marketing, merchandising, all these types of things. And then you walk into a room. Apparently, they basically had a suite at a hotel, and it was just Pop in a pair of shorts, Timmy and his jeans, and RC. And then he basically just said, we want X, Y, and Z, and we want you to do this. We want you to be you, and Kawhi's got giant hands. He doesn't talk, and this is how things work. And
did you see that thing with Kawhi and Shaq kind of putting their hands? Yeah, they had the same size hands.
Just to say that RC's been behind the scenes doing this forever for this squad, and he never gets the attention I think he deserves. He's a very shy guy, very much stays out of the public light. Just to wrap it up, do you think there's any scenario out there where he actually leaves San Antonio for Brooklyn or for any other squad?
The only reason I see someone leaving a situation like that is if he wants a new challenge, right? If he said he's done this, done that. But I don't see... I think if he would have done that, he would have done that already. I mean, they've been successful for a long time. I think he does value the idea of continuing the legacy more than just building a team. Like, I don't think he sees this as a one-off team. Like, this year we will be contenders. I think he looks like this is a system, this is a culture, and this is something I've built. So this is why we're continuing this.
If you ever seen Moneyball, there's a scene where, and it's based on a true story, the Brad Pitt's character, Billy Beane, was offered the job at the Boston Red Sox, threw the giant paycheck at him, and he turned it down. I mean, he had a situation where he made less money, but he had a family atmosphere where they were successful, they were growing.
There's a reason some coaches and players like playing in small cities.
Yeah.
It's because people leave you alone.
Yeah, and it's the privacy, but there's also that sense of family and being in the situation where you have creative control, where you don't have the pressure of the big city, and you've got something that works.
Yeah.
Why would you run away from that?
I wouldn't.